Hey, warrior, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone was pulling your strings? Like you were in a conversation and suddenly you were defending yourself, explaining your choices, justifying your life to someone who had no right to judge it. And the worst part, you didn't even realize it was happening until it was over, until you walked away feeling smaller, weaker, confused about who you really are. That's not an accident. That's manipulation. And the people who practice it have refined their craft over years. They don't need force. They don't need threats. They use something far more subtle. They use questions. The right question, asked at the right moment, can make you doubt everything you thought you knew about yourself. It can turn your confidence into confusion, your clarity into chaos, your strength into submission. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." But here's what he didn't tell you directly. Before you can revoke that estimate, you have to recognize when someone else is trying to install it in your mind. You have to see the game being played before you can refuse to play. We live in a world where truth has become negotiable, where people twist words like weapons, where your reality can be rewritten by someone skilled enough to ask the right questions in the right order. And most people, they don't even know it's happening. They think they're having a conversation. They think they're being reasonable. They think they're keeping the peace. But really, they're being programmed. One question at a time. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology is only now beginning to confirm. Control doesn't come from controlling circumstances. It comes from controlling your own mind, your perceptions, your reactions, your internal narrative. And the moment you let someone else take the pen and start writing that narrative for you, you've lost. Not the argument, not the conversation. You've lost yourself. So listen to me carefully. This video is not about winning arguments. It's not about clever comebacks or psychological tricks to dominate conversations. This is about something far more important. This is about recognizing when your mind is under attack and learning to defend it with the precision of a Stoic philosopher and the vigilance of a warrior who knows that the most dangerous battles are fought not with swords, but with words. Let me be clear about something. This message is not for everyone. If you're comfortable being led, if you're okay with letting others define your reality, if you prefer the warmth of illusion to the cold shock of truth, then this video is not for you. Close it now. Go back to sleep. There's no shame in it. Most people live their entire lives in that state. They're born asleep, they live asleep, and they die asleep, never once questioning the dreams they were told to dream. But if that fire still burns inside you, if you still have that part of yourself that refuses to kneel, if you can still feel that ancient rage against being controlled, manipulated, or diminished by anyone for any reason, then stay with me, because in this video, you're going to learn to recognize the 10 questions that liars ask to control your mind. And, more importantly, you're going to learn the Stoic principles that will armor you against them, not just today, not just in this conversation, but for the rest of your life. This is not theory. This is not philosophy for academics. This is practical wisdom for psychological warfare. And make no mistake, that's exactly what manipulation is. It's warfare. And right now, whether you know it or not, you're already in the battle. Number 1. Why are you being so defensive? This question is a masterpiece of manipulation. It's elegant, simple, and devastatingly effective. Because the moment you hear it, something happens in your mind. You start to question yourself. Am I being defensive? Maybe I am. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should calm down. And just like that, the manipulator has won. Not by proving you wrong, but by making you doubt whether you have the right to assert that you're right. Let's break down what's actually happening here. You've noticed something. Maybe a lie. Maybe a boundary being crossed. Maybe disrespect. And you've done what any person with self-respect should do. You've called it out. You've stood up for yourself. You've said no. And instead of addressing what you said, instead of engaging with the actual issue, the manipulator shifts the focus entirely to how you said it, to your tone, your energy, your supposed emotional state. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And this question is designed to make you suffer in your imagination, to make you imagine that you're the problem, that your perception is flawed, that your reaction is inappropriate. It plants a seed of doubt that grows into a tree of confusion. And while you're tangled in that confusion, trying to prove you're not defensive, the original issue disappears. The lie goes unchallenged. The boundary remains crossed. The disrespect continues. Here's what the Stoics understood that modern people have forgotten. Defending yourself is not a weakness. It's a responsibility. Epictetus taught his students that some things are within our control and some things are not. Your reputation? Not fully in your control. Other people's opinions? Completely outside your control. But your principles, your boundaries, your self-respect, those are entirely within your control. And defending them is not defensiveness, it's self-preservation. The average person hears, "Why are you being so defensive?" and immediately goes into explanation mode. They try to prove they're calm, they lower their voice, they soften their stance, they abandon their position just to demonstrate that they're reasonable. And in doing so, they give the manipulator exactly what they want: submission, compliance, control. The Stoic sees this question for what it is: a deflection, a manipulation tactic, and they refuse to engage with it. They don't defend their tone. They don't justify their emotions. Instead, they redirect to the actual issue. I'm addressing what you did, not discussing how I feel about it. Would you like to respond to what I actually said, or would you prefer to keep avoiding it? Simple, direct, unmovable. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly as Emperor of Rome, people questioning his decisions, his motives, his reactions, and his response was always rooted in the same principle. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He didn't waste energy defending his emotional state. He focused on what was true, what was right, what aligned with his principles, and so should you. Type this below if you understand. I defend my truth, not my tone. I defend my truth, not my tone. Say it. Mean it. Live it. Number 2, don't you trust me? This question is a trap disguised as intimacy. It masquerades as vulnerability, as hurt feelings, as a plea for connection. But underneath, it's a demand that you abandon your critical thinking, that you silence your intuition, that you trade your discernment for their comfort. And the cost of that trade? Your reality. Let me tell you how this works. You've noticed something inconsistent. Something doesn't add up. Maybe their story changed. Maybe their actions don't match their words. Maybe your gut is screaming that something is wrong. and you do what any intelligent person should do. You ask questions. You seek clarity. You investigate. And instead of providing that clarity, instead of respecting your need to understand, the manipulator makes it about trust. Don't you trust me? Suddenly, you're no longer investigating a discrepancy. You're defending your character. You're not asking a reasonable question. You're being accused of suspicion, of doubt, of not loving them enough, of not being a good friend, partner, or colleague. The entire frame shifts from "is this true?" to "am I a bad person for asking?" And most people cannot handle that emotional weight. So they retreat, they apologize, they stop asking questions, and the lie survives another day. Seneca understood this dynamic deeply. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. And the manipulator is poor in truth. They crave your blind acceptance because they cannot afford your scrutiny. They need your trust not because they've earned it, but because they cannot survive without it. And they will weaponize your desire for harmony, your fear of conflict, your instinct to be kind, to get what they need. Here's the Stoic truth that will set you free. Trust is not given, it's earned, and it's maintained through consistency, transparency, and integrity. Real trust doesn't fear questions, it welcomes them, because real trust is built on truth, and truth can withstand interrogation. When someone asks, "Don't you trust me?" as a response to a legitimate question, they're not asking about trust. They're demanding blind faith. And blind faith is not a virtue. It's a vulnerability. The average person hears this question and immediately feels guilty. They start reassuring the manipulator. "Of course I trust you. I just wanted to understand. I'm sorry for asking. I didn't mean to upset you." And with every word, they hand over more power, more control, more of their own mind. The Stoic responds differently. "I trust people who give me reasons to trust them. Transparency builds trust. Defensiveness destroys it. Would you like to answer my question? Or would you prefer to keep making this about my character?" They separate the issue from the emotion. They refuse to be guilt-tripped into abandoning their discernment. They understand that healthy relationships, whether personal or professional, are built on mutual respect, not blind loyalty. Epictetus taught that we should never surrender our capacity for judgment. "No one can hurt you without your consent," he said. And agreeing not to question someone? That's consent. Consent to be deceived. Consent to be controlled. Consent to live in someone else's version of reality instead of seeking your own truth. I want you to understand something crucial. The people who deserve your trust will never ask you to stop thinking. They will never punish you for seeking clarity. They will never make you feel bad for wanting to understand. Those who do, they're not building trust, they're demanding obedience. And there's a world of difference between the two. Comment this if you're ready. I question with love, but I never stop questioning. I question with love, but I never stop questioning. Let that be your standard. Number 3. Why do you always have to make things so difficult? This question is an accusation wrapped in exasperation. It's designed to make you feel like a burden, like asking for respect is too much work, like having standards is an inconvenience, like your boundaries are obstacles that everyone else has to navigate around. And the goal? To wear you down, to make you so tired of being labeled difficult that you become easy, pliable, controllable. Here's how it plays out. You've asked for something reasonable. Maybe you want honesty. Maybe you want follow-through. Maybe you want basic respect or consideration. And instead of simply providing what you've asked for, the manipulator makes it about how hard you are to deal with. They sigh. They roll their eyes. They act like you're demanding the impossible. And slowly, over time, you start to believe them. You start to think maybe you're asking too much. Maybe you should be more flexible. Maybe you should just accept less. And that's exactly what they want. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But the manipulator inverts this wisdom. They want you to see your standards as impediments, your boundaries as problems, your self-respect as something that stands in the way of harmony. And they want you to remove these things. Not because they're actually difficult, but because they're inconvenient for someone who wants to give you less than you deserve. Let's be absolutely clear about something. Having standards is not being difficult. Expecting honesty is not being difficult. Requiring respect is not being difficult. These are baseline requirements for any healthy relationship or interaction. The fact that someone finds them difficult tells you nothing about you. It tells you everything about them. It tells you they're used to people who accept less, who tolerate more, who don't push back. And your refusal to be one of those people threatens their entire operating system. The average person hears, "Why do you always have to make things so difficult?" And they internalize it. They start to see themselves through the manipulator's eyes. They become self-conscious about their needs. They start prefacing every request with an apology. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I know this is probably too much to ask, but I don't mean to be difficult, but..." And with every apology for existing, for having needs, for requiring basic human decency, they shrink. They become smaller, quieter, more manageable. The Stoic sees through this immediately. They recognize it as a reframing technique, an attempt to make the problem about them instead of about the manipulator's unwillingness to meet reasonable standards. And they refuse to accept that frame. Expecting honesty is not difficult, providing it is simple. Expecting respect is not difficult. Showing it is basic. If meeting basic standards feels difficult to you, that's information I need to consider. Seneca taught that difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. But he was talking about real difficulties, challenges that build character, growth that requires effort, not the manufactured difficulty of someone who wants you to stop expecting what you deserve. Real difficulty forges you. False difficulty diminishes you. Learn to tell the difference. Here's what I need you to understand. The right people will never make you feel difficult for having standards. They'll respect those standards. They'll meet them. They'll appreciate them, because they have standards too, and they recognize the value of mutual respect. The wrong people will always make you feel like you're asking too much, even when you're asking for the bare minimum. And your willingness to walk away from those people, to choose discomfort over disrespect, will determine the quality of every relationship in your life. You are not difficult. You are discerning. You are not demanding. You are self-respecting. You are not too much. You are exactly enough for the right people, and too much for the wrong ones. And that's exactly how it should be. Type this below. My standards protect me. They don't burden others. My standards protect me. They don't burden others. Own that. Number 4. Can't you just let it go? This question is pure manipulation disguised as wisdom. It sounds peaceful, mature, evolved, like the person asking it has reached some higher level of consciousness where they don't sweat the small stuff. But here's what it really means. Can't you just forget what I did? Can't you just ignore this boundary I crossed? Can't you just accept the disrespect and move on so I don't have to face consequences? Can't you just make this easier for me? Let me show you how this operates. Someone has wronged you. Maybe they lied. Maybe they betrayed your trust. Maybe they said something hurtful, and you address it. You don't explode. You don't attack. You simply state what happened and how it affected you. And instead of acknowledging it, apologizing, or making it right, they ask you to let it go. As if your pain is the problem. As if your memory is the issue. As if your unwillingness to pretend it didn't happen is what's keeping this situation alive. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But notice the manipulator's twist. They want to control your reaction by denying you the right to have one. They want you to react by not reacting, to respond by being silent, to handle it by suppressing it. And they package this demand as if it's for your own good, as if holding on to it will hurt you more than letting it go. But they're not concerned about your healing. They're concerned about their accountability. Here's the Stoic truth. Letting go is a choice you make after the issue has been addressed, after the boundary has been reinforced, after the lesson has been learned. It's not something you do instead of addressing it. It's something you do after. Real letting go is about releasing resentment, not excusing behavior. It's about freeing yourself from bitterness, not giving others permission to hurt you without consequence. The average person hears, "Can't you just let it go?" And they feel pressure. Social pressure. Emotional pressure. The pressure to be the bigger person, to keep the peace, to not be petty or vindictive. And under that pressure, they agree. They say yes. They pretend it's fine. And the issue goes underground. It doesn't disappear. It just stops being discussed. And it festers. It builds resentment. It erodes trust from the inside out. Until one day, the relationship collapses, and everyone wonders why. The answer: because too many things were let go instead of being dealt with. The Stoic response is firm and clear. I can let go of resentment, but I won't let go of my boundaries. I can release anger, but I won't release standards. I can choose peace, but not at the cost of pretending this didn't happen. If you want this to be over, address it. If you want me to move forward, acknowledge what occurred. Real closure comes from resolution, not suppression. Marcus Aurelius understood this balance perfectly. He wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." But being unlike them doesn't mean accepting the injury. It means handling it with dignity, with clarity, with strength. It means not lowering yourself to their level, but also not allowing yourself to be trampled in the name of false peace. There's a concept in Stoicism called sympathia, the interconnectedness of all things. And part of that interconnectedness is accountability. When someone wrongs you and faces no consequence, you've broken the natural chain of action and reaction. You've told the universe that this behavior is acceptable, and the universe, through patterns and repetition, will give you more of what you accept. This isn't mystical. It's practical. People repeat behaviors that work for them. And if "can't you just let it go" works, they'll use it again and again and again. You have a responsibility, not just to yourself, but to the relationship, to address what needs addressing, to hold the line where the line needs to be held, to teach people how to treat you through your unwillingness to accept less than you deserve. That's not holding grudges. That's maintaining integrity. Comment this truth: I let go of pain, never of principles. I let go of pain, never of principles. Make that your code. Number 5. Are you calling me a liar? This is deflection at its finest. It's a counter-accusation designed to put you on trial for having the audacity to notice inconsistency. Instead of addressing whether what they said is true, they make the issue about whether you're being disrespectful by questioning it. It's a power move, a linguistic judo throw. You came with evidence. They respond with emotion. And suddenly, you're not discussing facts anymore. You're defending your intentions. Here's the setup. You've caught them in a contradiction. Something they said today doesn't match what they said last week, or their version of events doesn't align with reality. And you point this out, calmly, clearly, without accusation, just stating the discrepancy. And instead of explaining it, instead of clarifying it, they escalate. Are you calling me a liar? Voice raised, emotion amplified, offense taken, and now you're in a completely different conversation. You're no longer investigating truth. You're defending against a charge of character assassination. Seneca observed, "If you wish to fear nothing, consider that everything is to be feared." What he meant was this: when you accept that danger exists, you can prepare for it. You can see it clearly. But the person who pretends there's no danger, they're the most vulnerable. And the person who makes you afraid to call out lies by punishing you for noticing them, they're creating a reality where truth cannot exist, where observation becomes offense, where clarity becomes cruelty. The average person backs down immediately when asked this question. No, I'm not calling you a liar. I just thought maybe you misremembered, or maybe I misunderstood. I'm sure there's an explanation. They trip over themselves, apologizing for using their eyes and ears, for trusting their own perception, for believing their own memory. And in that moment, they've surrendered something far more valuable than the argument. They've surrendered their relationship with reality. The Stoic understands something crucial. You don't owe anyone your confusion. You don't owe anyone your self-doubt. You don't owe anyone the luxury of making you question what you clearly saw or heard. And when someone tries to make you pay that price, you refuse. I'm saying what you told me doesn't match what you're telling me now. If there's an explanation, I'm listening. But I won't pretend I didn't notice the contradiction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." But here's the extension of that wisdom that people miss. While we should hold our own perceptions humbly, we should never let someone else's denial overwrite what we've clearly observed. Your perspective may not be absolute truth, but it's your data. It's your evidence. And when someone asks you to ignore your data without providing better data, they're not asking for fairness. They're asking for blindness. Here's what's really happening when someone asks, "Are you calling me a liar?" They're creating a false binary. Either you accept their version without question, or you're accusing them of deliberate deception. But there's a third option they don't want you to see. The option where you simply request consistency, where you point out the discrepancy without claiming to know why it exists, where you maintain your right to notice without accepting their emotional manipulation as a substitute for explanation. Epictetus taught his students to distinguish between what they control and what they don't. You don't control whether someone tells the truth. You don't control whether they can explain inconsistencies. But you absolutely control whether you accept confusion as clarity, whether you trade your perception for their comfort, whether you let emotional manipulation substitute for logical explanation. Those are choices. And the Stoic chooses reality over harmony, truth over peace, clarity over comfort. Every single time. The liar's greatest weapon is your fear of conflict, your desire to be liked, your instinct to avoid awkwardness. They bank on the fact that you'd rather doubt yourself than make them uncomfortable. And the moment you understand that, the moment you decide that your grip on reality matters more than their emotional state, you become unmanipulable, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. If this resonates, type, I trust my perception more than their deflection. I trust my perception more than their deflection. Own your clarity. Number 6. Why are you so sensitive? This question is emotional invalidation dressed as observation. It's designed to make you feel weak for having feelings, irrational for having reactions, unstable for having boundaries. The message underneath is clear. The problem is not what I did. It's how you responded to it. If you were stronger, more stable, more reasonable, more like me, this wouldn't be an issue. Therefore, you're the issue. Let me show you the mechanism. Someone has done something hurtful. Maybe they dismissed your feelings. Maybe they made a cruel joke at your expense. Maybe they violated a boundary you clearly stated. And you respond, not with rage, not with attack, but with clarity, with assertion, with self-respect. You say, that hurt me, or that's not okay, or I need you to stop. And instead of acknowledging the impact of their action, they question the validity of your reaction. Why are you so sensitive? Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire while facing constant criticism and betrayal, wrote, "Today, I escaped anxiety." Or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. But notice what he's doing. He's taking ownership of his internal state, not because external events don't matter, but because his response to them is within his control. The manipulator perverts this wisdom. They use it to suggest that your feelings about their behavior are solely your responsibility, that their actions have no impact, that you're manufacturing your own suffering, and if you just changed your perception, everything would be fine. But here's the truth the Stoics actually taught. Yes, your reactions are your domain. Yes, you have power over your internal state. But that doesn't mean all reactions are invalid. It doesn't mean that responding to disrespect with self-respect is oversensitivity. It doesn't mean that noticing harm is weakness. Stoicism is not about becoming numb. It's about becoming wise. About knowing what deserves your emotional energy and what doesn't. About responding to real issues with clarity, not ignoring them in the name of false strength. The average person hears, "Why are you so sensitive?" and they internalize it. They start monitoring their reactions, editing their feelings, suppressing their responses. They develop a fear of being seen as emotional, as weak, as too much. And in trying to prove they're not sensitive, they become insensitive to themselves. They stop trusting their own emotional signals. They ignore red flags. They accept treatment they shouldn't accept. All because someone convinced them that feeling something was the same as overreacting. The Stoic sees this question for what it is, a dismissal, an attempt to make them doubt their emotional intelligence, their intuition, their right to have boundaries. And they don't argue about whether they're sensitive. They redirect to the action that prompted the response. Whether I'm sensitive or not doesn't change what you did. Would you like to address that? Or would you prefer to keep criticizing my reaction to your behavior? Seneca understood this deeply. He wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." But he was talking about real trials, challenges that build character, not manufactured trials where someone hurts you and then mocks you for noticing. Real growth comes from facing genuine difficulty. False growth comes from learning to tolerate disrespect in the name of toughness. Know the difference. Here's what you need to understand. Sensitivity is not weakness. It's awareness. It's the ability to perceive what others miss, to feel what needs to be felt, to recognize when something is wrong before it becomes catastrophic. The person who calls you sensitive for having boundaries is often the person who benefits from you not having them. They want you numb, compliant, easy to hurt without consequence. And your refusal to become that person is not a flaw. It's integrity. Epictetus said, "If someone speaks badly of you, consider whether what they said is true. If it is, correct it. If it isn't, laugh at it." So apply this. If you're being genuinely oversensitive, seeing offense where none exists, creating problems from nothing, then yes, work on that. But if you're simply refusing to accept disrespect, if you're maintaining boundaries, if you're honoring your feelings instead of suppressing them for someone else's comfort, that's not sensitivity. That's strength. Your feelings are data. They're information about your environment, your relationships, your situation. And when someone tries to make you distrust that data, they're not helping you grow stronger. They're trying to make you more vulnerable, more controllable, more willing to accept what you shouldn't accept. Don't fall for it. Comment this if you understand. My sensitivity is my strength, not my weakness. My sensitivity is my strength, not my weakness. Believe that. Number 7. You're overreacting. This is the close cousin of "why are you so sensitive?" but with an added element. It's not just questioning your emotional validity. It's declaring it excessive. It's quantifying your response and finding it disproportionate. The implied message, I'm the reasonable one, and you're the unstable one. I'm the calm one, and you're the chaotic one. I'm the standard, and you're the deviation. And therefore, your perception of this situation is fundamentally flawed. Watch how this plays out. You've responded to something with appropriate emotion. Maybe frustration at being disrespected. Maybe hurt at being deceived. Maybe anger at being dismissed. Your response is proportional to the offense. But the manipulator doesn't want to deal with the offense. So they scale your reaction. They make it bigger than it is. They describe your calm assertion as an explosion, your clear boundary as aggression, your self-respect as drama. You're overreacting. And suddenly, you're not discussing what they did. You're defending the size of your response. Epictetus taught, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. And this is true. Your interpretation of events shapes your emotional experience. But the manipulator wants you to believe that any strong reaction is inherently a wrong judgment. That feeling strongly means thinking incorrectly. That emotional intensity equals mental instability. And this is false. Some things deserve strong reactions. Betrayal, disrespect, cruelty. These aren't minor offenses that require minor responses. They're significant violations that warrant significant boundaries. The average person, when told they're overreacting, immediately doubts themselves. They think, maybe I am. maybe this isn't that bad. Maybe I'm making too big a deal out of this. Maybe I should calm down. And they scale back, they soften, they retreat, and the original issue remains unaddressed. The disrespect continues. The pattern repeats, because the manipulator has successfully convinced them that the problem is their reaction, not the action that prompted it. The Stoic responds with precision. I'm reacting appropriately to inappropriate behavior. If my boundary feels excessive to you, that tells me you've gotten used to people who don't have boundaries. That's your issue to examine, not mine to adjust. They don't defend the size of their response. They don't argue about proportionality. They redirect to the fundamental issue. Was the behavior acceptable or not? If not, then the response is justified. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." But he also understood that having power over your mind doesn't mean surrendering your ability to respond to outside events. It means responding with intention, with clarity, with purpose, not with chaos, but not with silence either. Controlled response is not the same as no response, and the manipulator wants to conflate the two. Here's what's really happening. When someone tells you you're overreacting, they're trying to establish themselves as the authority on what appropriate reactions look like. They're positioning themselves as the judge of your emotional validity. They're claiming the power to decide what you should and shouldn't feel, how much you should and shouldn't care, when you should and shouldn't speak up. And the moment you accept that framework, you've surrendered your self-authority. You've outsourced your emotional compass. You've agreed that someone else gets to tell you what you feel and whether you're allowed to feel it. Seneca wrote extensively about anger, warning against excessive emotional response. But he also wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." Notice what he's saying. The injury is real. The provocation exists. The question is whether your response to it helps or hurts you. That's internal work. That's self-examination. But it's yours to do, not someone else's to dictate. The Stoic examines their own reactions honestly. Is this response serving me? Is this emotion productive? Is this boundary necessary? But they do this in private reflection, not in response to someone else's accusation. Because the manipulator isn't genuinely concerned about your emotional health. They're concerned about your compliance. They want your reaction small, your voice quiet, your boundaries permeable. And your willingness to examine yourself honestly is not an invitation for them to tell you what you should find. You are the authority on your own experience. You are the expert on your own boundaries. You are the judge of your own emotional responses. And while you should examine those responses for wisdom and growth, you should never let someone else's comfort determine their validity. Some things deserve big reactions. Some boundaries deserve firm enforcement. Some offenses deserve zero tolerance. And your willingness to own that, to stand in that, to refuse to be made small by someone who wants you manageable, is not overreacting. It's self-respect. Type this below. I decide what deserves my response, not them. I decide what deserves my response, not them. Claim that power. Number 8. Why do you always bring up the past? This question is an attempt to erase history, to act as if time heals all wounds without any action required, to pretend that unresolved issues resolve themselves simply by aging. The manipulator wants you to believe that the past is irrelevant, that what happened before doesn't matter now, that patterns don't exist, that history doesn't predict future. And your insistence on remembering, on learning, on seeing the pattern is framed as inability to move forward. Let me explain the dynamic. Someone has hurt you before, maybe multiple times, maybe in the same way, and it's happening again. So you mention the pattern. You point out that this isn't isolated, that this is part of a history, that you've addressed this before and nothing changed. And instead of acknowledging the pattern, instead of addressing why it keeps repeating, they make it about your memory. Why do you always bring up the past? As if your ability to remember is the problem, as if historical data is unfair evidence, as if pattern recognition is a personal attack. Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with repeated betrayals and challenges throughout his reign, wrote, "Look back over the past, with its changing empires that rose and fell, and you can foresee the future too." He understood that the past is not just history. It's information, it's evidence, it's the foundation for prediction. And anyone who asks you to ignore the past is asking you to make decisions without data, to trust without evidence, to hope without reason. The average person, when accused of living in the past, feels shame. They think, maybe I should let it go. Maybe I should give them another chance. Maybe I'm being unforgiving. Maybe I'm stuck. And they ignore their own experience. They dismiss their own evidence. They override their own pattern recognition. And they give the person who hurt them before another opportunity to hurt them again, because they've been convinced that learning from experience is the same as holding grudges. The Stoic sees this clearly. I'm not bringing up the past to punish you. I'm referencing it to protect myself. You've shown me who you are through repeated action. I'm choosing to believe you. If that pattern has changed, your current actions will prove it. But asking me to ignore history while you repeat it is not moving forward. It's asking me to pretend we're starting over while you continue the same behavior. Epictetus taught, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. And this applies to change. If someone has genuinely changed, they don't need to convince you to forget the past. Their present actions will speak clearly. Their new patterns will override the old ones. Their consistency will build new evidence. But if they're asking you to forget the past while repeating it, they haven't changed. They've just refined their defense strategy. Here's the truth. The past is not the past when it's still happening. When someone betrays your trust on Monday and asks on Friday why you won't trust them, the past is 3 days old. That's not history. That's current events. And when someone repeats the same harmful behavior quarterly for years, those aren't isolated incidents. That's character. That's pattern. That's information you need to make informed decisions about this relationship. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." But he also understood that real hurt creates real data, that actual betrayal creates actual evidence, that repeated patterns create predictive models. The Stoic doesn't suffer in imagination by catastrophizing the future, but they also don't suffer in amnesia by ignoring the past. They use historical evidence to inform present decisions. That's not bitterness. That's wisdom. The manipulator wants you to have a goldfish memory, to wake up every day as if yesterday didn't happen, to grant infinite chances without requiring any change, to ignore patterns in favor of promises. And your refusal to do that, your insistence on learning from experience, your commitment to letting someone's actions rather than their words define them, is not cynicism. It's sanity. Here's what you need to understand. Forgiveness doesn't require amnesia. Trust doesn't require blindness. Moving forward doesn't require pretending the past didn't happen. You can release resentment without releasing discernment. You can choose peace without choosing stupidity. You can hope for change without assuming it. And anyone who demands otherwise, who requires you to forget in order to forgive, who needs you blind in order to believe them, is not asking for a fresh start. They're asking for permission to repeat history without consequence. Comment this truth. I learn from patterns, not just promises. I learn from patterns, not just promises. Remember that. Number 9. I'm just joking. Can't you take a joke? This is cruelty disguised as comedy. It's disrespect wrapped in humor. It's a way to say hurtful things without facing consequences for saying them. Because if you object, you're the problem. You're too sensitive. You can't take a joke. You don't have a sense of humor. You're making a big deal out of nothing. The manipulator gets to hurt you, and you get blamed for noticing. Here's how it works. Someone says something cutting, something that exposes your insecurity, mocks your pain, or ridicules something you care about. And it stings, because it was designed to sting. But before you can respond, before you can set a boundary, they laugh. They smile. They say, I'm just joking. And now you're in an impossible position. If you say it hurt, you look weak. If you set a boundary, you look uptight. If you show any negative response, you're proving you can't take a joke. The perfect trap. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. He was talking about the freedom that comes from not needing others' approval. But the manipulator inverts this. They want you to accept being made foolish and stupid in public, and then judge yourself harshly if you don't laugh along. They want you to participate in your own humiliation, and they frame your refusal as a character flaw. The average person, when told they can't take a joke, questions themselves. Maybe I'm being too serious. Maybe I should lighten up. Maybe I'm making something out of nothing. Everyone else is laughing. So they force a smile. They pretend it's funny. They allow the disrespect because the alternative is being labeled humorless. And with every forced laugh, they teach the manipulator that this works. That they can say anything as long as they add a laugh track. The Stoic sees through the performance. They understand that real jokes don't require victims. That actual humor doesn't depend on someone's pain. That genuine comedy uplifts or observes truth. It doesn't weaponize insecurity. And when someone hides cruelty behind comedy, the Stoic doesn't argue about whether it was funny. They address the impact. You may have meant it as a joke. I'm telling you it landed as disrespect. If you care about how your words affect me, you'll adjust. If you care more about your right to joke than my comfort in this relationship, that's information I need. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And when someone mocks you, the worst thing you can do is mock them back. Descend to their level. Play their game. But the second worst thing you can do is nothing. Is silence. Is acceptance. The Stoic revenge is clarity without cruelty. It's boundary without bitterness. It's saying, that doesn't work for me, without needing them to understand why, without needing them to agree, without needing them to apologize. Just clear, firm, unmovable assertion of what is and isn't acceptable. Here's what most people don't understand about humor. Real humor creates connection. It acknowledges shared experience, highlights absurdity, or reveals truth in a way that makes you laugh because you recognize yourself in it. but humor at someone's expense. Humor that requires one person to be diminished so others can be entertained. That's not comedy. That's social cruelty. It's a dominance display. It's a way to establish hierarchy while maintaining plausible deniability. "I was just joking" is the linguistic equivalent of pushing someone and then claiming you were just playing. Seneca wrote about the importance of choosing your company carefully, about surrounding yourself with people who elevate you, not diminish you, and part of that choice is refusing to accept relationships where you're the punchline, where your pain is entertainment, where your insecurity is comedy. Those aren't friendships. Those aren't partnerships. Those are audiences watching you perform humiliation and calling your discomfort entertainment. You don't owe anyone your laughter at your own expense. You don't owe anyone participation in jokes that hurt you. You don't owe anyone tolerance for disrespect just because it's delivered with a smile. And your boundary around this, your refusal to be the victim in someone else's comedy routine, is not oversensitivity. It's self-respect. The person who can't make you laugh without making you hurt? That person isn't funny. They're cruel with a sense of humor. And your unwillingness to reward that, to laugh along, to pretend it's fine, is not you lacking humor. It's them lacking respect. Know the difference. Type this below. I laugh with people, not at myself for them. I laugh with people, not at myself for them. Stand firm on that. Number 10. Everyone else is fine with it. Why aren't you? This is peer pressure disguised as evidence. It's an appeal to majority as if truth were democratic, as if your boundaries become invalid if others don't share them, as if your discomfort is unreasonable if the crowd is comfortable. The manipulator wants you to believe that if you're the only one objecting, you must be wrong. That consensus equals correctness, that your individual standard should yield to collective acceptance. Let me break down the mechanism. You've stated a boundary. You've identified something that doesn't work for you. And instead of respecting it, instead of acknowledging it, the manipulator surveys the room. No one else has a problem with this. Everyone else is fine. It's just you. And the implication is clear. The problem is not the behavior. It's you, your boundary, your standard, your expectation. You're the outlier. You're the exception. You're the difficult one. And you should adjust. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire where everyone wanted something from him, where every decision faced opposition, where consensus was impossible, wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." He didn't write, "If everyone else thinks it's right, then do it." He didn't write, "If the majority believes it's true, then say it." He based his actions on principles, not polls, on truth, not trends, on what was right, not what was popular. The average person crumbles under this question. They look around. They see others accepting what they're refusing to accept. And they think, maybe I'm being unreasonable. Maybe my standards are too high. Maybe I should be more like them. And they lower their boundary. They soften their standard. They override their own comfort to match the collective tolerance. And in doing so, they betray themselves. They choose belonging over boundaries, acceptance over autonomy, and they pay for it in resentment, discomfort, and loss of self. The Stoic understands something fundamental. Other people's boundaries are not your boundaries. Other people's tolerance is not your tolerance. Other people's standards are not your standards. And that's not just okay. That's necessary, because you're not other people. You have different experiences, different histories, different values, different needs, and what works for them might not work for you, not because you're flawed, but because you're different. Epictetus taught his students, "Don't seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well." But he wasn't telling them to accept mistreatment. He was telling them to focus on their response, not on controlling outcomes. And part of that response is setting boundaries that reflect your values, regardless of whether others share those boundaries. Here's the response. I'm glad they're comfortable, but I'm not them. This doesn't work for me, and I'm not asking for their permission or yours to have a different standard. I'm informing you of my boundary. Whether others share it is irrelevant to whether I maintain it. Simple, clear, unmovable. Seneca observed that we are mad not only individually but nationally. We check manslaughter and isolated murders, but what of war and the much-vaunted crime of slaughtering whole peoples? He was pointing out that collective acceptance doesn't make something right, that the crowd can normalize atrocity, that majority opinion can endorse horror. And while the stakes in personal relationships are usually lower, the principle remains. Just because everyone accepts it doesn't make it acceptable. Here's what you need to internalize. You are not obligated to match the lowest common denominator of acceptable treatment. You are not required to accept what the masses accept. You are not bound by the collective tolerance of your peer group, your family, your workplace, or your culture. You are an individual with individual needs, individual standards, individual boundaries, and your right to maintain those is not contingent on whether others agree with them. The manipulator uses others as leverage against you, but those others aren't in this relationship. They don't have your history. They don't have your experience. They don't have your context. Their comfort with something tells you nothing about whether you should be comfortable with it. And your refusal to let their acceptance override your boundary is not stubbornness. It's integrity. There's a concept in Stoicism of living according to nature, by which they meant living according to your rational nature, your true self, your deepest values. Not according to society, not according to trends, not according to what everyone else is doing. And when you allow everyone else is fine with it to overwrite your own discomfort, you're abandoning that true self. You're letting the crowd determine who you are. And that's how you lose yourself completely. Your boundary is valid because it's yours, not because others share it, not because it's popular, not because it passes some democratic vote. It's valid because you need it, because it protects you, because it honors who you are and what you value. And anyone who tries to invalidate it by pointing to others who don't have it is not respecting you. They're pressuring you. And your refusal to yield to that pressure is the difference between living your life and living someone else's idea of what your life should be. Comment this if you understand. My boundaries are mine, not a democracy. My boundaries are mine, not a democracy. Own that completely. Listen to me carefully. We've walked through 10 questions, 10 weapons, 10 manipulation tactics disguised as reasonable conversation. And if you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, then you understand something most people will never understand. That words are not just communication, they're programming. That questions are not just curiosity, they're control mechanisms. That conversations are not just exchanges, they're battles for your mind. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to confirm. Your mind is your kingdom, and every day there are forces trying to invade it, to plant flags, to install programs, to rewrite your reality. Some of these forces are obvious: advertising, propaganda, explicit manipulation. But the most dangerous ones? They come from people you trust, people you love, people you've let inside your walls, and they use your openness, your kindness, your desire for harmony as access points. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who held absolute power, yet practiced absolute self-control, left us with a final instruction. Be like the rocky headland against which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and around it the seething waters are laid to rest. He wasn't telling you to be cold. He was telling you to be unmovable, not rigid, not brittle, but grounded, rooted, so deeply established in your own truth that no wave of manipulation, no current of control, no storm of emotional warfare can displace you. Each of these 10 questions is a wave. Why are you being so defensive? Wave. Don't you trust me? Wave. Why do you always have to make things so difficult? Wave. Can't you just let it go? Wave. Are you calling me a liar? Wave. Why are you so sensitive? Wave. You're overreacting. Wave. Why do you always bring up the past? Wave. I'm just joking, can't you take a joke? Wave. Everyone else is fine with it, why aren't you? Wave after wave after wave. And most people, they're swept away, they're moved, they're displaced, they lose their footing, they forget their truth, they surrender their ground, but not you, not anymore. Because now you see the pattern, you recognize the manipulation, you understand the game, and more importantly, you refuse to play, not with anger, not with bitterness, not with the exhausting energy of someone fighting against manipulation, but with the quiet power of someone who simply will not be moved, who stands in their truth, who maintains their boundaries, who protects their mind, who guards their reality, not because they're at war with the world, but because they're at peace with themselves. Seneca, who faced exile, who lost everything, who lived under the constant threat of an emperor's whim, wrote these words: "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." And he was right. Most of our suffering comes from accepting mental prisons we could simply walk out of, from fighting battles in our minds that aren't real, from defending ourselves against accusations that have no power unless we give it to them. The manipulator's greatest weapon is your participation, your willingness to engage, your need to defend, your fear of being misunderstood. And the moment you withdraw that participation, the weapon is useless. Think about that. Every one of these questions only works if you play along, if you defend your tone instead of addressing the issue, if you try to prove you trust instead of requiring trustworthiness, if you apologize for your standards instead of maintaining them, if you let go before resolution instead of after, if you defend yourself against false accusations instead of redirecting to truth, if you suppress your feelings to prove you're not sensitive instead of honoring your emotional intelligence, if you scale back your response to match their comfort instead of maintaining appropriate boundaries, if you forget the past to make them comfortable instead of learning from patterns, if you accept disrespect disguised as humor instead of requiring respect in all forms, if you lower your standards to match the crowd instead of honoring your individual needs. Every single manipulation tactic requires your cooperation, your self-doubt, your people-pleasing, your conflict avoidance, your need for approval, your fear of being difficult, your desire for harmony at any cost, and all of these are understandable. human, natural, but they're also exploitable. And the person who understands this, who sees your beautiful human tendency toward kindness and connection and peace, and weaponizes it, that person is not your friend. That person is not your partner. That person is not someone who has your best interests at heart. Epictetus spent years as a slave before gaining his freedom. And when he finally established his school of philosophy, do you know what he taught first? Some things are in our control and others not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, property, reputation, command, and, in one word, whatever are not our own actions. He was teaching autonomy, self-ownership, the radical responsibility of recognizing that while you cannot control what others do, you have absolute sovereignty over your own mind, your own responses, your own boundaries, your own truth. And that sovereignty is what every manipulator seeks to conquer. They want to make you doubt your perceptions, question your reactions, suppress your boundaries, override your instincts, silence your truth. And they use these questions as invasive tools, as ways to get inside your sovereignty and dismantle it from within. But they can only do this if you grant them access, if you accept the premise of their questions, if you engage with the manipulation instead of recognizing it and refusing it. This is not about becoming defensive, not about becoming paranoid, not about treating every question as an attack. Real questions deserve real answers. Genuine curiosity deserves genuine response. Honest confusion deserves patient clarification. But these 10 questions, they're not honest, they're not genuine, they're not curious, they're strategic, they're calculated, they're designed. And your ability to distinguish between honest engagement and strategic manipulation will determine the quality of every relationship in your life. So how do you make that distinction? How do you know when a question is real versus when it's manipulation? Here's the test. Ask yourself, is this question seeking to understand me? Or is it trying to make me doubt myself? Is this question opening dialogue? Or is it closing down my perspective? Is this question respecting my experience? Or is it invalidating it? Is this question about finding truth? Or is it about avoiding accountability? An honest question creates space for your truth. A manipulative question tries to shrink that space. An honest question wants to know your answer. A manipulative question already has its answer and wants you to accept it. Marcus Aurelius faced manipulation daily. Senators who wanted power, generals who wanted glory, philosophers who wanted influence, subjects who wanted favors. And everyone had questions. Everyone had angles. Everyone had strategies. And his defense? Simple. Unshakable clarity about his own principles. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. He didn't defend his goodness. He didn't explain his decisions. He didn't justify his boundaries. He simply lived according to his values and let the chips fall where they may. That's the ultimate Stoic defense against manipulation. Not cleverer responses, not better arguments, not more sophisticated counter-strategies, just absolute clarity about who you are, what you stand for, what you will and will not accept, and unshakable commitment to those standards regardless of pressure, regardless of questioning, regardless of manipulation. You become like that rocky headland, not because you're hard, but because you're grounded, because you know where you stand, because you've decided who you are, and nothing Not the cleverest question, not the most emotional manipulation, not the most strategic pressure can move you from that ground. But here's what this requires. It requires something modern culture tells you not to do. It requires you to stop seeking universal approval, to stop needing everyone to understand you, to stop trying to make everyone comfortable with your boundaries, to stop explaining yourself to people who have no interest in understanding, to stop defending your truth to people who are invested in their lies. It requires you to become okay with being misunderstood by people who are determined to misunderstand you, with being called difficult by people who want you easy, with being called sensitive by people who want you numb, with being called unforgiving by people who want to repeat their mistakes without consequence. Seneca said it perfectly. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. But he also said this: the wise man will live as long as he ought, not as long as he can. What he meant was this: quality matters more than duration. A life lived according to your principles, even if it costs you relationships, even if it makes you unpopular, even if it leaves you standing alone sometimes, is superior to a long life spent compromising yourself, accepting disrespect, maintaining relationships that diminish you, just to keep the peace. Better to stand alone in integrity than to belong in betrayal of yourself. And that's the final truth I want to leave you with. The Stoic path is not about becoming popular. It's not about being liked by everyone. It's not about smooth relationships and effortless harmony. Sometimes, often, it's about standing firm when everyone else is bending, about seeing clearly when everyone else is in denial, about speaking truth when everyone else is comfortable with lies, about maintaining standards when everyone else has lowered theirs. And that will cost you. It will cost you approval. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you relationships with people who cannot or will not rise to meet you where you stand. But here's what it will give you: self-respect, clarity, integrity, relationships with people who see you, value you, respect you not despite your boundaries, but because of them, a life lived on your terms, a mind that belongs to you and no one else, peace that comes not from avoiding conflict, but from knowing you stood for something worth standing for. And at the end of your days, when you look back, you won't wonder who you could have been if you had been braver. You'll know because you were, because you chose yourself, because you protected your mind, because you refused to surrender your sovereignty to anyone's manipulation, because you walked the Stoic path. So here's my challenge to you. Starting now, today, this moment, practice these responses, not as scripts, not as weapons, but as expressions of your boundaries. When someone asks, "Why are you being so defensive?" practice redirecting. "I'm addressing what you did." When someone asks, "Don't you trust me?" practice clarity. "I trust people who give me reasons to." When someone asks, "Why do you make things so difficult?" practice firmness. Standards aren't difficult. Meeting them is simple. When someone asks, "Can't you just let it go?" practice wisdom. I let go of resentment, not boundaries. When someone asks, "Are you calling me a liar?" practice grounding. I'm saying your story doesn't match your story. And keep going. Through all 10. Through every manipulation you encounter. Not with anger, not with aggression, not with the exhausting energy of someone at war, but with the calm, grounded, unmovable presence of someone who knows who they are, who knows what they will and will not accept, who has decided that their mind, their reality, their sovereignty is not up for negotiation, not for anyone, not for anything, not ever. Marcus Aurelius ended his meditations with this: "You can live your entire life well if you act rightly in each moment. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, not without difficulty, but rightly, according to your principles, your truth, your values. And each moment that you recognize manipulation and refuse to participate, each conversation where you maintain your boundary despite pressure, each time you choose self-respect over approval, you are acting rightly. You are living well. You are walking the Stoic path. And that path, it doesn't end. There's no destination where you've arrived, where manipulation no longer exists, where everyone respects your boundaries automatically. The path is the practice. The practice is the path. Every day, every conversation, every question that comes your way, you decide. You choose. You stand. Or you don't. And the sum of those choices over months and years and decades becomes your life, becomes your character, becomes your legacy. Not what you said you believed, but what you actually stood for when standing was difficult. So stand. Right now, type your commitment below. Choose the affirmation that hit you hardest, that resonated deepest, that you need most. Maybe it's, "I defend my truth, not my tone." Maybe it's, "I question with love, but I never stop questioning." Maybe it's, "My standards protect me, they don't burden others." Maybe it's, "I let go of pain, never of principles." Choose one. Type it below, not for me, for you, as a declaration, as a commitment, as a line in the sand between who you were before this video and who you're choosing to become after it. And then, do more than type. Live it. When you face these questions today, tomorrow, next week, remember. Remember what you learned here. Remember what you committed to. Remember who you decided to be. Remember that your mind is your kingdom, and no one enters without permission. No one rewrites your reality without consent. No one diminishes you without cooperation. And you've decided, haven't you? That cooperation ends now, that permission is revoked, that consent is withdrawn, that your mind belongs to you, today, tomorrow, always. If this message changed something in you, hit that like button, not for the algorithm, for yourself, as a marker, as acknowledgement that you heard this, you absorbed this, you're committing to this. Share it with someone who needs it. Someone who's being manipulated and doesn't see it yet. Someone who's lost themselves trying to keep everyone else comfortable. Someone who needs permission to stand firm. Be that permission. And subscribe, because this path requires reinforcement. You need reminders. You need wisdom. You need the voice that calls you back when you start to drift, when you start to doubt, when you start to compromise. Stay on this path with me. Keep walking, keep standing, keep growing, because the Stoic path is not walked once. It's walked daily, and every step you're choosing, sovereignty or submission, clarity or confusion, strength or surrender, you over them, choose you, every time, in every moment, for the rest of your life. That's the path, that's the practice, that's the victory, not over them, over the part of you that wants to give in, to please, to avoid, to accept less than you deserve. Victory over that, daily, eternally, until your last breath you stand in your truth, unmoved, unshaken, free. Walk the path, warrior. Your mind is waiting for you to reclaim it.